Hello and welcome to part 2 of 5 parts on healing, health, and wholeness gospel style. I'm Reverend Matthew E. Long with Peace Unity Network. It's my pleasure to present this material to you after many years of working with the Gospels, working with the Bible, and coming up with what I think a fairly unique understanding of these the principles presented. And so this is course is on a practical application of the principles that were demonstrated by Jesus in the Gospels. And I mentioned this is the second session. The first session was entitled was about faith healing. It was called Jesus' Formula for Healing, and we started off by establishing the metaphysical basis for health. Now, hopefully you've been to the website, peaceunity.net, and gone to the tab under Library, and then Classes, Healing, Health, and Wholeness, and gotten the outline for last week and the worksheets for today, and the worksheets for the next 3 weeks as well, that give the references to the stories that we'll be talking about today. So last week with the talking about faith healing, we used the framework, the metaphysical framework of the threefold nature of being. Metaphysics, Unity Metaphysics, it works with frameworks, which are frameworks for understanding the absolute in relative terms. And the threefold nature of being is spirit, soul, and body. Mind, body, spirit. There's a lot of different ways of describing it. And I applied that to faith healing, and looked at the spiritual aspect of faith, which is belief. Our belief is what focuses our faith. The mental aspect, which is the willingness to do what is ours to do, to give up and to take on. And then the physical aspect of thanksgiving, of gratitude. The gratitude makes it real, makes faith real. You can go back and look at that tape if you haven't already looked at it. Today, and for the next 3 weeks, we'll be using the 4 functions of consciousness, another framework for understanding. It's very similar but different. And the functions of consciousness are intuition, thinking, feeling, and sensing. The intuition and the sensing are inputs, if you will, and the thinking and feeling are the way we process information. And we either get our information through from spiritual channels through our intuition, or through physical channels through our senses. And what we do with that is we think about them and we feel about them, or we feel about them and we think about them, and then we take action. So today we're talking about the spiritual healing, which works with our intuition, directly connecting with that spirit of God, if you will. So the first, I would like to share with you some of the books that I work with, and today I'm going to do some quoting, but I won't do so much in the future, because I'd really just want to introduce you to these books if you haven't already found them. The first one is The Revealing Word, which is a collection of words that are used in the scriptures that are not proper nouns and places, and taking from the writings of Charles Fillmore, co-founder of Unity, and talking about the spiritual healer. Got to put my cheaters on here. Spiritual healer, one who helps man reform so that bodily healing follows as a natural consequence. What are we reforming? We're reforming our consciousness, we're reforming our minds, we're reforming our ideas about healing, health, and wholeness, our relationship to God, the nature of God, and our relationship to God, and our ability to express God. So, one who helps man reform so that bodily healing follows as a natural consequence. When we're in a consciousness of healing, healing is what results in our body. In order to have bodily perfection, it is necessary to bring the mind to a state of righteousness. And of course, righteousness is the right use of our consciousness. It's not about how we relate to other people, but how we relate to ourselves. It's the right use of our consciousness. This is the work of the spiritual healer. So spiritual healing. I also share a little bit from this book, Your Hope of Glory. Elizabeth Sand Turner was a longtime Unity minister and taught at Unity School and did a series of books on the Bible, and this one's about the Gospels, about the 4 Gospels. And she talks about this incident and says, the secret of spiritual healing is the recognition and acknowledgement of wholeness in the person who is expressing a physical limitation. Let me repeat that. The secret of spiritual healing is the recognition and acknowledgement of wholeness in the person who is expressing a physical limitation. So if what we see is the disease, if what we see is the physical limitation, if what we see, and we're not able to see beyond the appearances of sickness and disease, if we're not able to see beyond the appearances of conflict and war, if we're not able to see beyond the appearances of lack and limitation, then we're not able to participate in the spiritual healing. And in order to participate in someone's spiritual healing and in our own spiritual healing, we have to see beyond the appearances, to see that holy, perfect, sinless child of God that we truly are. The Christ within, or as Paul said, the Christ in you, the hope of glory. Jesus said, in that day you will know that I am in you as you are in me and we are in the Father. That we are one with God, that we are made in the image and after the likeness of God. And this first story that we're going to talk about has to do with the nobleman's son, the official, in the King James Version, who came to Jesus. And it's in the 4th chapter of John. And the beginning of the 4th chapter, begins with his conversation with the woman at the well in Samaria. And just a quick summary of that, he said that God is spirit, and that those who worship in spirit and in truth, that God is worshipped in spirit and truth. And he also talked about the living waters that well up and we would never thirst. And then it leads into the nobleman's son. So the writer, John, who we call John, had this it was written in sequence for a purpose, that we're calling forth that living water. We're calling forth that awareness of God as spirit, that we are made in the image and after the likeness of, and to bring forth that spiritual awareness within us. So the story begins that he came to Cana in Galilee, where he had changed the water into wine. That's the first sentence. We'll just stop there for a minute. Cana in Galilee. Cana, in another one of these compilations of Charles Fillmore's works called the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, which looks at all the names and places, the proper names, the nouns in the Bible. And it talks about Cana. And I won't be reading a lot after today, but I definitely want to bring this out just to give you an idea of what's in here. It talks about Cana, which literally means a place of reeds, measuring rod, balance, etc., etc. And metaphysically, in the body, it is symbolized by the larynx. So right here in the throat, this is the power center. Cana of Galilee is the power center in consciousness. And we know that in the beginning, God said, "Let there be light." And in the book of John, it begins with, "In the beginning was the Word." And the Word is that vibratory energy. If you put your hand on your throat as you talk, you can feel the vibration. And so all of the universe, all of creation, is that vibration of God. And science is beginning to prove that with string theory, and I won't go into that. But at the very essence of creation, at the very essence of all of manifestation, is this vibratory energy. And we can connect that with our word, and our words do connect with that. And it's a matter of connecting with the spiritual idea of health and healing and wholeness, and to use that power center. And it says that he changed the water to wine. That was the first sign, and when we get to the end of the story, it says that this is the second sign. And the book of John is around 7 signs, and that's a whole nother class that I will get eventually up onto the website here. I haven't got it up there yet, but it's coming. And he went to a royal official whose son lay ill in Capernaum. And Capernaum is an inner conviction of the abiding compassion, restoring power of being. An inner conviction of the abiding compassion, with love, with healing energy, and restoring power of being. What is being? Capital B being is God. Everything capital B, spirit, being, love. When there are capitals, we're talking about the nature of God, of nature of the absolute, infinite, unlimited potential for being that God is and will be. So here we have that power center where we have the Christ within, we have the Spirit entering into the power center of the energy of life, coming into Capernaum, that restorative center, truth in our subconscious. Okay, so we heard Jesus had come from Judea to Galilee. He went and begged him to come down. So when he went from Judea to Galilee, and now I'm going to share another book. Well, actually, I already shared this one, didn't I? Your Hope of Glory, where she talks a little bit about this, and she says that got to be on the right page, right? Oh, wait a minute. I want to be in Mysteries of John. That's the other one, right? Mysteries of John. Sorry about that. This is a book written by Charles Fillmore and looks at the gospel according to John. And in here he talks about Jesus came into Galilee and the Galileans received him. Spiritually interpreted, this means that the indwelling Christ reaches spiritual consummation, spiritual unity with the original spirit, in the measure that it manifests life and functions in spirit consciousness. Now let me break that sentence down for you a little bit. Christ reaches spiritual consummation. And then there's a comma. So what the next part defines what spiritual consummation is, which is spiritual unity with the original spirit. Now the second spirit is a capital S. So it's our individual realization of our spiritual unity with God, with spirit. So, and I'll skip that part and just say, Christ reaches spiritual consummation in the measure that it manifests life and functions in spirit consciousness. In the measure that it manifests life and functions in spirit consciousness. So we realize that healing, that we reach spiritual consummation, that we realize our healing to the extent that we enter into that consciousness. And that's the man, it says that unless you see signs and wonders, you will not believe. But then the man says, I do believe. And then he goes home and finds out that his son was healed at the moment he said he believed. Remember, this is the spiritual aspect of faith, that our belief directs our faith. And we don't have to have signs and wonders, that we can believe without having to have before we have the physical expression of that. So let's move on to the second story, which is a man with unclean spirit, or a man with demons. And I'm going to go from, this is in Mark and Luke. And again, he's in Capernaum, and it's on the Sabbath. Now the Sabbath, in the book The Revealing Word, says that it's a state of spiritual attainment where we realize that we can rest in God. Now, is the Sabbath a day of the week? Well, physically, materially, that's what we talk about. One day a week, and it's always good to have at least one day a week where we connect with God, either through prayer and meditation or spiritual reading, whatever it is that we participate in order to experience that. So a state of spiritual attainment. And he entered into the synagogue, which is an aggregation of spiritual ideas. This is where people come to congregate to experience God, to experience spirit. And metaphysically, it's an aggregation of spiritual ideas based on truth, a realization that we are one with God. So he's in this synagogue, and the people are astounded by his teachings, and a man enters the synagogue with an unclean spirit, or demons. And demons are error consciousness. A demon is those false ideas, those compulsions and obsessions that keep us separated from our awareness of our spiritual nature. And Jesus rebukes them and says, be silent and come out. So the Christ that we have to connect with, that Christ within, the Christ within, which says, quiet, be quiet, be quiet. To quiet those compulsive, obsessive thoughts, those negative, destructive thoughts that we participate in. The third healing story is in the three synoptic gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And I'll go with the Mark version because it has the most detail. And it says, as soon as they left the synagogue, they entered the house of Simon and Andrew with James and John. Let me stop there for a second and say, Simon, or Peter, is these are the 4 of the 12 disciples of Jesus. And each one of the disciples represents a spiritual faculty. And the spiritual faculties, also known as 12 powers of man, are aspects of our being that make up the Christ within, that holy, perfect, sinless child of God within us. We all have faith. We all have wisdom. We all have love. We all have strength. And I could go on, but those are the 4 that are being represented here. Simon, or Peter, who represents faith, and Andrew, who represents strength, and James represents wisdom, and John represents love. So we have the Christ within. We have this healing power entering into the house of Simon and Andrew, and he brought with him into faith and strength, and brought with him wisdom and love. And Simon's mother-in-law. Now, women generically stand for the soul nature, or the feeling nature, if you will, whereas men are more for the mental or intellectual symbology, and we can go into that. So the soul nature was in bed with a fever. We've all had soul fevers. We've all been worked up emotionally, and they told him about her at once, and he came and took her by the hand and lifted her up. Lifted up that soul nature, lifted up that emotional nature up to an awareness of spirit, awareness of God, awareness of good, and the fever left her. She was calm, just as the demon was calm. If we go into the 4th healing episode, and we'll be talking about 6 of them today and 6 of them next week, and so we go through them fairly quickly and just giving you the Reader's Digest version, if you will. And this one I'll share from Matthew, because it says, when Jesus had come down from the mountain, well, it's chapter 8, and the Sermon on the Mount is chapters 5, 6, and 7. So he's just delivered this message to the people of hope. And there was a leper that came to him, and leprosy, or lepers, really deal with separation consciousness, that we are separate from God, separate from our good. It's about as far away from health and wholeness as we can experience. So a leper came to him and knelt to him and said, Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean. Now, in the King James Version and some of the other versions, it says, if you will. And so last week we talked about the willingness. And it brings it to a choice, that really healing is a choice. Health and wholeness is a choice that we make every day. And every day we can grow in our awareness of the Spirit and the power within us. And we can grow in our awareness of God working through us as health and as wholeness. So it's a choice that we make. And I reference back to the book of Joshua, chapter 24 and 15, where they've conquered the Holy Land, and they've partitioned it off. And he says, well, you can follow the gods back in Egypt, you can follow the gods of people here, but as for me and my house, we choose to follow the one God. And that's the choice that we get to make. The 5th story is in Matthew, Mark, and Luke as well. And this is the one of the story about the paralytic. So he was in Capernaum once again. People gathered around him, and they brought him a paralyzed man carried by 4 men. And they couldn't get into the house because there were so many people listening to what Jesus had to say. So they had to remove the roof and lower him down through the roof. This is removing those obstructions. Removing the roof, which means getting rid of those error consciousness, those error ideas, and opening ourselves up to an awareness of Spirit, awareness of God, that error thought. And of course, talks about sins. He says that your sins are forgiven. Whoa, what is a sin? Sin is missing the mark. Literally means missing the mark. It's error thought. We're falling short of the divine idea of health and wholeness, that we can be transformed by the renewing of our minds. That's the lessons of Paul in the book of, And the 6th, I'm trying to keep this down to 20 minutes here. The man with the withered hand. Again, he enters into the synagogue, that collection of divine ideas, and a man with a withered hand. And of course, it's on the Sabbath once again, and this time it's the Pharisees. Before it was the scribes. The scribes were the keepers of the law, and the Pharisees were the teachers of basically the lawyers, maintained the law. So they were all about the observing the letter of the law versus the spirit of the law, that we need to look within. And of course, he had him stretch out his hand, he was healed. And it's all about recognizing. So spiritual healing is all about realizing our connection with spirit, opening ourselves up to a realization of spirit healing power working in and through and as us. And our affirmation for this series, that I hope you will continue to pray with me, is I am happy, healthy, whole, and free, just as God created me to be. I am happy, healthy, whole, and free, just as God created me to be. So it is, and so it shall be. Amen, and yea, God. Go God. God bless, and go in peace.